It's April 15th, 2019, and it's time to review 5 of the most outrageous, infuriating, or just plain baffling things that have happened lately. It's your Facepalm 5. Let's count 'em up. Number 1, Congress considers banning IRS from offering free tax filing software. Since today is tax day for me and my fellow Americans, it seems only fitting to start with a story related to us paying our taxes, what a pain in the ass it is for many of us, how many companies are deeply invested in profiting from that pain in our collective ass, and how Congress looks out for the best interests of those companies at the expense of us, the taxpayers. Here's the deal. Congress is currently considering a bill titled the Taxpayer First Act. You're suspicious already, aren't you? And, well, you should be. Given the track record of the United States Congress, it's reasonable to assume that any bill titled something like the Putting the People First Act will contain at least one important provision that does not, in fact, put people first. In the case of the Taxpayer First Act, that provision comes in the form of a section that bans the IRS from creating its own free online filing system. People who earn less than $66,000 annually can already file their taxes for free online. I should know, that's how I've always done my taxes. But the free tax preparation software currently available is provided by private companies like H&R Block. Under the current arrangement, the IRS agrees not to develop its own free tax preparation software as long as private companies offer free online tax filing to those who are eligible. This bill would essentially inscribe this agreement between the IRS and the private tax preparation companies into law. What's so bad about that? For one thing, the companies who offer this free file service use it to upsell more expensive options and to collect private information from taxpayers, which the companies then use to market other products to those same taxpayers. For another thing, online tax prep software created and managed directly by the IRS itself could just be a lot quicker and easier to use. The main group lobbying in favor of this provision of the bill is called the Free File Alliance, which represents the private tax prep companies. The Free File Alliance insists it only wants to make tax preparation as easy and affordable for taxpayers as possible. But last year, ProPublica reported that the Alliance stated in an SEC filing that the IRS creating its own free online tax filing system would be, quote, a competitive threat to our business and have, quote, adverse revenue implications. That's scumbag business lobbyist speak for we're against it because it'd cost us money. The House version of the Taxpayer First Act passed the Ways and Means Committee week before last and currently enjoys significant bipartisan support. Happy Tax Day, everyone! Number 2, Ohio enacts one of the country's most restrictive anti-abortion laws. Last week, the governor of Ohio signed that state's version of the so-called heartbeat bill into law, making abortion illegal after a fetal heartbeat is detectable. In many cases, a fetal heartbeat is detectable as early as 5 or 6 weeks, before many pregnant people even know they're pregnant. I wonder what we'd find if we checked the sponsors of this bill for heartbeats. Similar laws enacted in other states have been struck down in court as unconstitutional, and the ACLU has vowed to fight the Ohio version as well. But these setbacks haven't discouraged the anti-abortion lobby, which enjoys a great deal of influence in the Republican Party and has made measures like the heartbeat bill central to its efforts to block funding and access to abortion for as many Americans as possible. Laws like the heartbeat bill have another purpose as well: to provoke legal challenges that could eventually find their way to the U.S. Supreme Court, where it's hoped a right-leaning court will issue a ruling favorable to anti-abortion activists, perhaps even overturning Roe v. Wade. The Ohio bill was entitled the Human Rights Protection Act, which distorts the issue so brazenly that if it didn't threaten to rob the people of Ohio of one of their most precious and personal human rights, it would almost be funny. Number 3, Republicans change Senate rules to more easily confirm Trump nominees. Week before last, Republicans in the U.S. Senate invoked the so-called nuclear option, voting to change Senate procedures, cutting debate times for most presidential nominees from 30 hours to 2 hours. The change is intended to streamline the confirmation process, which has been stalled by Democratic opposition to Donald Trump's nominees. Prior to the rule change, in a move that was shameless even by his own standards, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell published an op-ed wherein he complained about Democratic obstruction. In the piece, McConnell accuses Democrats of breaking with Senate tradition to engage in, quote, all-encompassing systemic obstruction. He also warns of the consequences of continuing this, quote, partisan paralysis. Just in case you forgot, McConnell is the one who made obstructing the agenda of President Barack Obama a very public priority. McConnell is also the one who refused to even consider Obama's nomination to fill a vacancy on the U.S. Supreme Court that occurred during the final year of Obama's presidency. In fact, many of the court vacancies McConnell is now complaining about the Democrats obstructing him from filling are left over from the previous administration, when McConnell spent years blocking and delaying President Obama's nominees. This is like the Joker blaming Gotham City's homicide rate on Commissioner Gordon. The new rule change will allow Republicans to begin confirming more of Trump's nominees to fill vacancies in U.S. district courts, which could, in turn, have a devastating effect on the aforementioned fight to protect access to abortion, as well as voting rights, LGBTQ equality, and other areas of social progress the Republican Party has set itself to destroy. Number 4, Trump administration approves dozens of denied security clearances. 2 weeks ago, Tricia Newbold, a veteran security advisor who served under both Republican and Democratic presidents for nearly 20 years, told the House Oversight and Reform Committee that 25 individuals were given security clearances by the Trump administration after first being denied those clearances by herself and her colleagues. The officials who received these questionable clearances were not named by the committee, which met with Newbold behind closed doors, but the list includes 2 current senior White House officials. According to Newbold, one of them, identified publicly only as Official 1, was initially denied a security clearance after a background check revealed, quote, significant disqualifying factors, including foreign influence, outside business interests, and personal conduct. That sounds like it could have been Trump himself. Or literally anyone who has ever worked for him. Doesn't really narrow it down, is what I'm saying. Newbold told the committee that her concerns about Official 1 were overruled by Carl Klein, who, at the time, was director of White House personnel security and Newbold's direct superior. After Official 1 was granted that security clearance, they applied for a higher level of clearance, and Newbold was contacted by someone from another agency. I'm not saying it was the CIA, and neither is this Washington Post story, though granting security clearances at the highest level is something the CIA does, for whatever that's worth. The person from this other agency that could plausibly have been the CIA, but who knows, was calling Newbold to figure out how Official 1, who is probably Jared Kushner, but we don't know that for sure, so don't spread that around, managed to get a security clearance after that background check. Newbold also said she was punished for her refusal to cooperate with the administration's demands for security clearances. In January, she was suspended without pay for 2 weeks and subsequently demoted despite having a spotless disciplinary record. Well, she must have done something. Why else would they suspend her? This is far from the first time concerns have been raised about the way Trump is abusing the security clearance process. Last year, Trump ordered his then Chief of Staff John Kelly to get a top-secret clearance for Kushner, whose application had been rejected. Stories like this are upsetting, obviously, but they're also important to talk about because they help to fill out one of the most basic and important truths about the Trump presidency, namely that it is awful and inexcusable in every conceivable way. So much so that even if you're not particularly troubled by one facet of the awfulness, there's still more than enough awfulness left in play to justify removing this man and his criminal cronies from power as soon as possible. Even if you agree with Trump's politics. And hey, fuck you if you do, by the way. That's a personal message from me. But even if you agree with his politics, you shouldn't be able to just shrug off the fact that he has staffed his administration with people who could not pass a background check. And not just a handful of people who were quickly replaced, but at least 24 people who failed their background checks and were given clearance anyway. This shouldn't be a political issue, even if you hate Muslims and refugees as much as Trump does. And again, fuck you if that is the case. This ought to bother the hell out of you. The fact that it doesn't bother more people on Trump's end of the political spectrum is one of the most damning facts about the Republican Party and American conservatism in general that I know. And now it's time for the segment devoted to some of the other things Donald Trump has done recently to disgrace the presidency and embarrass and/or endanger the United States and the rest of the world. It's number 5, the further misadventures of Lord Dampnut. Please keep in mind, as always, the following is not a complete list. Speaking of how much Trump hates refugees, especially ones from Mexico and Central America, his Homeland Security Secretary, Kirstjen Nielsen, announced her resignation last week, reportedly because Trump was unhappy with how she was carrying out his immigration policies. One of the major points of contention between the two of them was Nielsen's refusal to go along with Trump's demands to resume and escalate the practice of family separation, which resulted in thousands of undocumented children being taken from their parents and essentially lost. So Trump didn't force Nielsen out because she carried out all those crimes against humanity. He forced her out because she wouldn't carry out even more. He said repeatedly over the past 2 weeks, during a visit to a Border Patrol station, during a speech in Las Vegas, and of course on Twitter, that the United States can't take any more immigrants or refugees because our country is full. The day after he posted that tweet, The Week published an article about a recently released study by the Economic Innovation Group, which found that 41% of American counties are facing serious population declines, particularly in demographics that typically make up the workforce. In other words, the opposite of what Trump said is true, which is almost always the case. I could chop down the running time of any one of these videos if this segment was just me saying Trump said something, but the truth is actually the opposite of the thing he said. It wouldn't be specific, but it would be true. Anyway, what else? He declared for like the 7,000th time that the media is the enemy of the people. He said Congress should reform the immigration system, including getting rid of the whole asylum system and getting rid of judges. Even if you assume he meant specifically immigration judges, and it's hard to be certain because he's such an erratic, inarticulate shithead, it's still the President of the United States saying we'd be better off without those judges, wouldn't we? He sees judges as impediments. Judges are the people who tell him he can't do things, which is the very reason we need to keep them around, particularly in the immigration system, given the racist and brutal attitude shown toward immigrants and refugees by this president and his administration. He tweeted a video attacking Representative Ilhan Omar, who has received death threats. The president joined in on attacking a member of Congress who has gotten death threats. Just wanted to say that one again so it sank in. Last week, he tweeted that he was considering releasing undocumented immigrants into sanctuary cities, saying the radical left always seems to have an open borders, open arms policy, so this should make them very happy. So either Trump is tacitly admitting that all his fear-mongering about the dangers posed by undocumented immigrants is the made-up bullshit we know it is, or he's telling us he intends to release what he considers to be a horde of violent thugs into cities controlled by his political enemies. As with so much of what Trump says and does, no matter how you interpret his intentions, they're horrible. And finally, on Friday, Trump's trans-military ban went into effect. Absurdly, the Pentagon claims the policy is not actually a ban on transgender people serving in the armed forces because trans people can still serve as long as they don't transition and continue to live as the gender they were assigned at birth. So as long as trans people pretend to not be trans, they can still join the military and everything will be fine? Their presence won't threaten effectiveness or unit cohesion? That kind of confirms that trans people were never the problem in the first place, though, doesn't it? The problem was never trans people, but the small-minded prejudice felt toward trans people by those who put this policy into place. A policy, by the way, that no one asked for prior to Trump assuming the presidency, and which an overwhelming majority of the American people does not support. You really want to strengthen the readiness and effectiveness of the armed forces? Don't ban trans people, ban transphobes. The military would be better off without them, and so would every other institution. That's 5. Speak out, act out, resist, look after each other. Hi folks, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please like, share, subscribe to the channel if you're not subbed already. And also, please consider helping me to make more videos like this one and like the other videos I make on this channel by supporting this channel with a monthly donation through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron for as little as $1 a month. And believe me, those $1 pledges really help me out. They add up, they make a big difference, but if you can afford it and you think I'm worth it and you pledge at $5 a month or more, you get yourself a shout out at the end of the Facepalm 5, just like these folks who are my newest $5 or more per month patrons. Their names are Omar Abraham, thank you Omar, Scott R. Jameson, thank you Scott, Fred Patterson, thank you Fred, The Booger Boo, thank you, The Booger Boo. Juso Millerine, thank you, Juso, and I apologize if I was not even in the ballpark of correct with that pronunciation. Feel free to correct me on that if it's necessary. Slarty Bartfarst, thank you, Slarty Bartfarst. Sujiwa Kumaratunga, thank you, Sujiwa. And John Limbacher. Thank you, John. Thanks to everybody who supports this channel and this work I do in whatever form that support takes. Whether you are a patron who just joined, whether you are a patron who has been a patron for years, whether you're pledging $1 a month or 5 or 10 or 20 or however much you're pledging, whether you're not pledging anything at all and you just watch the videos and like and share and do all the free stuff, all of it counts, all of it makes a difference. I could not do this without you. So thank you all for your support in whatever form it takes. I appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.